Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. It is episode 2682 of The Tom Woods Show. And today we're going to have a little fun. I want to share with you what I did last weekend, which is in fact, some of you even saw me there. I was a speaker at the Ron Paul 90th birthday barbecue in Lake Jackson, Texas. And I did several things. I gave a main stage little mini address, but I also made a couple of podcast appearances with Matt Kibbe and with Josie, the redheaded libertarian. So I'm taking those with the permission of those hosts and bundling them all together in this fun end-of-the-week episode of The Tom Woods Show. So enjoy. Well, thank you all very much. To contextualize my very brief remarks, it is important for me to point out that I am joined tonight by my wife and by two of the five Woods daughters. We have Veronica, who's 20, and Sarah, who's only 11. Woohoo! Now, I point this out to you because Sarah, being born in 2014, was not around when the name of Ron Paul was being bandied about the household during the presidential campaigns. So she didn't hear this name as often as the other Woods children did. So when we made our way here, I wanted to explain to her, why does this man matter? Like, why did we fly all the way from Florida to wish him a happy birthday? So Sarah, here is my answer. And it comes in a number of parts. Now, I hope you will all indulge me, because today has been a series of tributes to Dr. Paul, but allow the old man here to take a crack at it also. And one of the points that a lot of people have made is that he told the truth when it would have been a lot easier to just repeat the lies everyone else was telling. That's the first thing. And that's very important. If I'm explaining to my 11-year-old why this man matters, that's right at the top of the list. Secondly, on matters of principle, you could not twist his arm. If he didn't believe in something, you could not twist his arm to change his mind. Ronald Reagan himself could not twist Ron Paul's arm. He's a tough guy when it comes to defending our principles. My favorite email I ever received from Ron Paul was only 5 words long. He forwarded me an especially nasty article about homeschooling with the note, "This needs to be smashed." Then also because he stood up for causes and ideas that had rarely, if ever, had a true champion in public life. And by the way, you could tell he was onto something by the way the media attempted to conceal him from you. It was especially bad in 2008, but they still tried doing it again in 2012, when I was down here just a few months ago speaking for the Ron Paul Institute. I had a slide up on the screen. This was a screenshot taken in 2012, or maybe it was a 2012 campaign, may have been taken in 2011, from MSNBC. And they had listed on the screen 4 GOP presidential candidates in order of how successful they'd been in fundraising in the most recent quarter. Now, because I'm a nerd who follows these things very closely, I knew Dr. Paul was number 2 on that list. On their list, we had number 1, number 3, number 4, and number 5. There was no number 2. That's not normal. Even Jon Stewart, who I would not describe as a friend of ours, was honest enough to ask the question on The Daily Show, when did Ron Paul become the 13th floor of a hotel? We weren't the only ones picking up on this. So you'll notice around the room, we have these inflatable blimps. Now, some of you youngsters won't remember this. The movement is still divided to this day as to whether this was a good expenditure of funds, but I will hear no spoil sports today. Today we celebrate the blimp. We came to the conclusion the media is going to conceal this man from everyone. So what if we fly a blimp over the country that says, "Google Ron Paul"? You got to admire the gumption. You just have to. And they didn't like that he blasted through the stupid non-debates we have. Now, we've heard today about the Giuliani moment in that 2007 debate, but I want to remind you about a debate we've probably all forgotten, and for good reason. In January 2008, the last of the GOP presidential debates, it was down to 4 candidates: McCain, Romney, Huckabee, and Ron Paul. And most of the debate was McCain and Romney inanely arguing about whether there should be a timetable on withdrawing troops from Iraq and who would withdraw how many troops when. And finally, Ron Paul pointed out, this whole debate is mind-numbingly ridiculous, because the problem is not how many, when, and under what conditions. It's the whole thing was stupid and evil, and we should take all the troops out now. Why are we obsessed with minutia? Well, just this morning in my hotel room, I looked up, how did Politico cover that debate? Now, a normal country with a normal media would say, one candidate finally exposed the limited nature of our debates in this country, that the debate is between two kinds of interventionists. And come on, today, who can tell the difference between Mitt Romney and John McCain? Come on, I defy you to tell me the difference between these two, but it was the argument they were having that was the important thing. That's exactly how Politico handled it. Well, there was a big debate between McCain and Romney. No mention of Ron Paul puncturing the whole thing. Not even there. He could predict the future. I almost hate to make fun of poor Bill Kristol because it's so easy to do, The poor guy has been beaten senseless by our friend Scott Horton. You can see that online. That was his own fault. Why would you agree to debate Scott Horton on anything? And boy, did he get kicked around by Scott on that debate stage. Oh my goodness, terrible. But life and death is at stake here, so I am going to make a little fun of Bill Kristol. Bill Kristol said things that you think now nobody really said, that these must be caricatures of what people said. But he did say that the war in Iraq would last 2 months. He did say that we would be vindicated when we discovered huge stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. He did say American forces would be greeted as liberators. And he did say that the whole region would be transformed in our image. Now, that's all false fantasy world stuff. Dr. Paul predicted exactly what wound up happening, which was something like the opposite of everything I just said. So I was a little lazy this morning, so I asked Grok. I said, Grok, I'm on a first-name basis with old Grok. Tell me a little bit about the differences between Bill Kristol and Ron Paul in their predictions about the war in Iraq, but I want to take these 2 passages and share them with you. Quote, Kristol faced criticism for his inaccurate predictions, but maintained influence in media and policy circles with no significant professional repercussions. Paul's opposition, while prescient, marginalized him in mainstream media as no major U.S. outlet hired prominent war opponents like him. And then this. Bill Kristol's predictions for the 2003 Iraq War were overly optimistic, envisioning a quick victory, WMD discovery, and regional transformation that never materialized. Ron Paul's warnings of prolonged conflict, economic costs, and blowback proved more accurate, reflecting the war's actual outcomes. Yeah, how about that? And yet, for some reason, the guy who's living in fantasy world is still on TV. And he still keeps getting invited, and he keeps showing up at the cocktail parties. That's not normal. But we had a guy who started to chip away at that foundation. In 2007, he started to chip away at it because he wouldn't play by the rules. You're either McCain or you're Romney. I think the world is a little bit broader than just the 2 millimeters separating John McCain and Mitt Romney. And then in 2001, he said on the House floor that the Fed was trying to blunt the dot-com crash by inflating a housing bubble. Well, that is exactly what happened. Exactly. But Herman Cain, who was also a GOP presidential candidate, what he said about a week before Fannie and Freddie went under. He said there's nothing wrong with the U.S. economy, and anybody who says there is just a liberal who hates George W. Bush. That was the level of economic analysis Dr. Paul was competing against. And finally, he's one of the few politicians who isn't an ego case. I years ago proposed to Dr. Paul that he write his autobiography, because I think that would be a fascinating story. Not just his life in politics, but his whole life. What formed him? How did he become Ron Paul? I think we'd all love to hear that story. But he declined because he genuinely couldn't believe anybody could really be interested. The Ron Paul Institute is called the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, but Dr. Paul calls it simply the Institute for Peace and Prosperity, because he's not an ego case obsessed with himself. And his point is that what matters are the ideas, not him as a person. I remember one time I asked his wife, Carol, I said, now we all remember Dr. Paul had a stroke one day during the recording of the Liberty Report. Oh, I beg your pardon. Even I did it just there. The Ron Paul Liberty Report, excuse me. And he got a picture taken of himself in the hospital with his thumbs up. I'm sure did not want to do this, but the world wants to know if you're okay, Dr. Paul, let us know. So he had this picture of himself in the hospital with the thumbs up, and Donald Trump retweeted that with the word "great!" exclamation mark. So I asked Carol, well, what did you think about, the president wishing your husband well, when he was in the hospital? And she said, he did? Ron hadn't even bothered to tell her. Now, if the president wished me well, you better believe my wife would hear about that 100 times in the first hour. But that's not what he's about. He's a man who believes in freedom, in peace, in smashing war propaganda, and telling the public unpopular truths they need to hear. Now, no matter how many elections we have, so many awful things just keep happening, like with a dreary predictability. But the example of Ron Paul seared into our brains that a better world is possible if we want it. So those, my dear Sarah, those are some of the reasons this man matters. And they also happen to be the reasons we love him. So happy birthday, Ron, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, gang, if you're like me, and I bet you are, you've been watching the Fed inflate the dollar into oblivion while politicians bungle trade policy and rack up historic amounts of debt, and you're wondering how to protect what you've worked so hard to build. Well, that's why I want to talk to you about Monetary Metals, a company doing something truly revolutionary with gold. We all know gold is a safe haven asset, but let's face it, most gold just sits there in a vault, not doing much. It holds its value over time, but it doesn't grow. Well, what if I told you there's a way to not only own physical gold, but also earn a yield on it, paid in gold, every single month? That's exactly what I do with Monetary Metals. I lease my gold with them and earn an annual yield, around 4%, in gold, not in paper currency. I keep my ounces, and every month I get more. Think about it. You still benefit from any price appreciation, like what we've been seeing in 2025 with gold pushing past all-time highs. And you also get paid more ounces of gold along the way. And that's what makes this model so exciting. It's a genuine breakthrough. For the first time in decades, gold is functioning as a yield-bearing asset, just like in the classical gold standard days. The Fed can print dollars. They can't print gold. It's time to start growing your wealth in ounces, not just hoping for the best with fiat. Go to monetary-metals.com/woods to learn more and see how you can start earning a gold income too. That's monetary-metals.com/woods. All right, folks, here I am with your friend and mine, Matt Kibbe, from Kibbe on Liberty. Here we go.
Welcome, everybody. This is the very first time I've done something really live, so we'll see how beautiful this chaos gets. I am at the Ron Paul 90th birthday party in Lake Jackson with my good friend Tom Woods. Welcome, Tom.
Matt, a pleasure.
And my idea for this is, and we're just going to keep bringing people in, my idea for this is to talk to some of the most important people in the movement about their Ron Paul origin story, like How important was Ron Paul to you building out your career as a young educator?
Well, my story goes all the way back to seeing a Ron Paul for President Libertarian Party bumper sticker in 1988. And I was 16 and saying to my mother, what does that even mean? Like, I've never heard of this guy. And she tried to explain it to me, but I had him in my mind. Like, I knew who he was. And I knew he'd been a former congressman. And in 1993, I had a chance to meet him briefly. I got a book autographed by him. So by the time he ran for president in 2007, I knew all about him. In fact, I had kind of lost interest in politics around 1996 because Bill Clinton versus Bob Dole. I said, I cannot bring myself to get interested in this. So I just gave it up. But every 2 years, I would check to make sure Ron Paul had been reelected. I had no idea what he was up to. You know, the internet was very much in its infancy in those days. But something about knowing he was still there made me feel better. And election after election, I would find he was still there. He was still there. So for me, when it was announced that he would run for president, I thought, well, this will be interesting because he's very different from anybody else who would be running. And I can't wait to see how it turns out. I couldn't have predicted that people would chant "End the Fed," that there'd be a renaissance of Austrian economics, that all these things would have come out of it. But it definitely gave me a boost in a number of ways because I started being the opening speaker for him at a lot of big events, and people got to know who I was. And there was in 2009, I was at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, or I don't know if it's outside Washington. It doesn't matter. But at that event, that was the event in 2009. And my book Meltdown on the Financial Crisis had just come out. And that was the event where, for the first time, I was surrounded by people who wanted to get a picture with me and get my autograph. And I was standing there talking to Dan McCarthy, who's at ISI now. And all of a sudden, when the doors opened, this happened. I remember looking over at him, Dan, what is happening? I don't know quite what happened, but being in this Ron Paul orbit has been a real thrill for me because, for one thing, after he left office, he decided to create a homeschool curriculum, self-taught, video-based K through 12. And he said, would you create some courses for that? So I did that. And this is stuff, yeah, I could have created those courses for my own audience, but this is Ron Paul asking me to do it. And I really felt like being able to do that was my way of, feeling like something that you've accomplished will outlive you. Like this could help educate people for the long haul, and it was all because of this one man. I mean, I know people who have gotten married because they met during the Ron Paul movement. And I mean, there are all kinds of crazy, great outcomes that happened that he could never have predicted. But with me, it was like, I knew this guy was a hero. I was going to be glued to the set when it came to his presidential campaign. And in fact, I remember there would be video clips coming out every day on YouTube, like a bit of a speech he gave, a bit of an interview. And I would just, I was so unproductive that year because my day would be, well, what's he up to now? What provocative thing has he said now? And so, of course, he didn't win. I understand that. He didn't win. But I think about there are a lot of other people who didn't win. John Huntsman didn't win. I bet nobody listening to this remembers John Huntsman. Duncan Hunter didn't win. No one remembers Duncan Hunter.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Ron Paul, so here's an interesting thing. 2008, he released the book, The Revolution. And it was like a manifesto of his ideas. And publishers were unconvinced about this because they said, the general consensus of publishers was no one's going to remember Ron Paul after the election. So there's no point in publishing this because it came out in April of 2008. He's going to be long gone and forgotten. But there was one publisher, Grand Central Publishing, that said, let's roll the dice on this. And ended up hitting #1 on the New York Times list. Over at Wiley, the old guard at Wiley said, this will sell 8,000 copies, forget it. But the young people at Wiley who tried to get this contract said, it'll sell 8,000 on the first day. You don't get the phenomenon that this guy is.
Yeah. I heard about Ron Paul for the first time in probably 1982 from my professor.
Oh,
Dr.
You got me beat.
Because I'm older than you. Dr. Hans Senholz, who was an intellectual mentor.
Yeah.
And he kept talking about this young congressman who was talking about honest money and all of that stuff. But like you said, back then, the club, we all knew each other by name because there weren't any of us.
Right.
And something happened with the first Ron Paul Republican campaign and followed by the Tea Party. The Ron Paul Revolution, the Tea Party, was fueled by the internet and social media. Yeah. And that democratized everything. And these ideas that were so important and persuasive to us, we finally had the megaphone to we could reach everybody.
Yeah. And it meant that if you had an idea that wasn't somewhere between Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, you might have a fighting chance of being heard. If you had a criticism of the Federal Reserve, no one had criticism of the Federal Reserve, you might actually have a fighting chance of being heard. Or if you thought that the debate over U.S. foreign policy was much too narrow, it was just between two different wings of interventionists. What if there was a non-interventionist? You actually had a chance for being heard. I think in 2008, a lot of Americans weren't quite ready for that message yet because it was so different from anything they'd ever heard. And now it's like, for half the country, it's the most obvious thing in the world. We should stay out.
Yeah. And, for a hot minute, you had Elon Musk, the head of Doge, talking about ending the Fed, very expressive on the non-interventionist ideas of Ron Paul. So we're like knocking on the door to the halls of power now. And it's not driven by, save for brave hearts like Thomas Massey, it's not driven from the inside. It's driven from the bottom up.
Yeah, and that's been what a bizarre thing this has been to observe over the years. I mean, when that first campaign was taking place, you will recall distinctly that the media went out of its way either to ridicule him or ignore him. Like he just was not a factor. I'm probably tonight going to mention, because I'll never forget this, in 2012, they still were trying it in 2012. MSNBC had a graphic on the screen, and it was a list in order of how much campaign cash they had on hand of the GOP candidates in quarter two. And it was Romney. Romney was number one, but Ron Paul was number two. But on this graph, they had number one, number three, number four, number five. There was no number two. And so it reminds me of in the first campaign. Now, people will argue about whether this was a good use of money or not. I refuse to consider such mundane concerns. The Ron Paul movement ran a blimp over the country as a way of saying, look, NBC isn't going to tell you about this guy. No one else is going to tell you about this guy. What if we put a blimp in the sky that tells you to Google Ron Paul,
So corporate media was always a problem, but I don't think they appreciated at that point the power of social media, and they would have, eventually the censors would turn their targets on social media. But at that time, the money bombs were literally bombs because everybody could do it without their permission.
And it was so this was a guy who had, without complaining, given speeches to rooms full of 35 people, and now he's giving the same speeches to a room with 3,500 people and watching these money bombs come in. And he's changed nothing about himself. He doesn't flatter people. He doesn't say what focus groups want him to say. He's the same guy, but yet he had reached the remnant.
It's that intense sincerity, I think, was so revolutionary. I mean, he doesn't seem like a revolutionary guy, but in politics, sincerity is hard to find, if possible.
He's unrehearsed.
Yeah. It's real. So what do you think the future holds? We have about a minute left. The future holds, because the show, the main stage, was started by a comedian and then a musician, and we have all of these entertainers and persuaders and people that are genuine rock stars in social media. What's next for the Ron Paul legacy?
Well, what's interesting now is that a guy like Piers Morgan, who frankly just wants ratings, he wants views, he wants clicks, has realized that people in our orbit bring him exactly that. So he'll do it. So he'll bring them on. And so our folks are getting more and more exposure. And again, not by selling out, not by compromising, but being interesting, informed, entertaining, lively, and different. Not the same old drones we're all accustomed to. So for that particular reason, and in that regard, I have some optimism for the future.
Yeah, I love watching Scott Horton and Dave Smith pick apart their debate partners.
Yeah, it's a blast.
It's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure, Matt.
All right.
Hey, everyone, here's a stat that'll shock you. Nearly half of American adults say they would suffer financial hardship within 6 months if they lost their primary income earner. Now, if that hits close to home, you're not alone, and you're not out of options. Policy Genius makes finding and buying life insurance simple, ensuring that your loved ones have a financial safety net they can use in case something happens to you, whether to cover debts and routine expenses or even to invest the money and earn a return over time. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. It's an easy way to protect the people you love and feel good about the future. Policy Genius helps you compare your options by getting quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Talk to a team of licensed agents who will walk you through the process step by step. They'll answer any questions you may have, handle paperwork, and advocate for you throughout the process. Policy Genius lays out all your options clearly, coverage amounts, prices, terms. There's no guesswork. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace, and it has thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best policy fit for their needs. Secure your family's future with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com to compare free life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. All right, now this is my brief conversation with the woman who goes by Josie, the redheaded libertarian on Twitter. And here we go. And so she has Spaces with Josie, and Matt has Kibbe on Liberty. They're both worth checking out. Now, I'm pretty sure I repeat a story here, but that's because I figured they don't have entirely the same audience. So I did repeat a story, but it's an important story. So with that, here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaces with Josie. I'm your host, Josie, the redheaded libertarian, and with Timcast Media. And we're coming to you live from the Ron Paul birthday barbecue, and I'm doing a series of mini interviews. And my next interview is with Tom Woods. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, Josie, good to see you again.
Good to see you. It's good to finally meet you.
In person.
Yeah,
yes.
it's been years.
Yeah.
It's been years, and we're finally doing this.
Yes.
And we both live in Florida, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
and we somehow haven't met, even though we both live in the same,
Well, you're going to come to my Christmas party
I know.
this year, I assume.
I would love to come to the Christmas party. I think I was thinking of coming last year and ended with a migraine or something. I can't remember. Something came up, but would love to come again.
Yeah, and it's all the people you would want to see.
Oh, great.
And
it's
none
like
of the people
here.
you don't.
It's like your Twitter comes to life.
It does.
I love that. So there's no haters there. It's all
That's
just
right. No haters.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. So we're going to talk a little bit, since we're at Ron Paul's birthday barbecue, I figured we'd talk about Ron Paul and kind of your history with Ron Paul. And my own history with Ron Paul is discovering him in 2012 and then just following him like in the shadows after that. Like I was just lurking in the shadows until I became the redheaded libertarian. And I mean, there was like a 5-year time period that went by in that time, but you were actually involved with his campaigns. I'd love to hear a story or two about some of your experiences.
Okay, well, I'll just say, first of all, he is exactly the same person off camera that he is on camera.
Oh, I love that.
You know, a lot of you remember Amy Klobuchar? She's a Democrat senator.
Yeah.
And on TV, she tries to seem like a normal person, but then you find out that she's a horrible human being who abuses her staff and is nasty all the time. He's the opposite of that. You know, he's the exact opposite of that. But there was one time, I cannot tell you this story. I'll tell you this at the Christmas party.
Okay.
You have to come to the Christmas party.
Okay, I will.
There's one time he got angry at me.
Oh.
You don't ever want that to happen. Because can you imagine Ron Paul angry at something other than war?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That would break my heart.
But
it's like my grandpa being angry with me.
But I'll say, for me, even in 2012, I was part of a super PAC, and we made some ads for Dr. Paul that I think were pretty effective.
Yep.
But one of the challenges of making an ad for him is I want to tell the whole story about how awesome he is, and I've got 1 minute. And how am I going to do it? So I could focus on he's really good on guns, but there are going to be other candidates who are kind of okay on guns.
Yep.
So how are we going to do it?
Are you going to set them apart?
So we did it. You can find it on YouTube. You just type Ron Paul, Plastic Men, because I was saying that the other candidates were like plastic men. Rick Perry, Mitt Romney.
You were right.
So I did it. I wrote a 1-minute ad, and it took forever because I wrote it out and it was 8 minutes. And then I cut it as much as I could and it was 6 minutes. It has to be 1 minute. And in 1 minute, after I don't know how much time, I really think I conveyed why we love him in just that 1 minute. So that was one of my proudest achievements in in being part of Revolution PAC. But I do want to, I guess mentioned to you my involvement in helping get a book of his published.
Yes.
Yeah. So because that's a big part of the story of the campaign also. And that is in April of 2008, he had this book, and I had quite a few successful books at that point too. Some of Dr. Paul's books had been either published in-house or whatever. And so I had a literary agent. Let's see what we could do with Dr. Paul's book. But the consensus among publishers was nobody's going to care about Ron Paul in 2008 because the campaign's over and he's going to be forgotten. And to some extent, you can understand why they thought that, because nobody remembers John Huntsman.
Yeah.
He ran in 2012. Nobody even knows who he was, right? Nobody remembers who Duncan Hunter was. He ran with Ron Paul. But there was a publisher, Grand Central Publishing, who had a young editor who said, I think there's something different about this Ron Paul. And at Wiley Publishers, the young editors wanted to take on this project. The old stodgy people who didn't get it were saying, oh no, this book will sell 8,000 copies. And the young editors were saying, this book is going to sell 8,000 copies on the first day. But they didn't get it. The old fogies won out. So Grand Central Publishing decided to take a chance on it. And it ended up hitting #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And that young editor got a massive promotion because he had rolled the dice on this. But yeah, so that was a case where I remember it came out. It was the #1 book. And I loved the idea that I could walk into a bookstore and there's Ron Paul's book on display. So I went into the local Books A Million, couldn't find the #1 selling book in the country, couldn't find it anywhere. And they explained to me they weren't planning to carry it. And I thought, how many #1 books do you not plan? I mean, you're so against him that you don't even want money. Like that part of it is bizarre. Like they don't even want the money.
You wonder who, do you think it was the bookstores?
I have no idea. Was it the chain? Was it the store? I have absolutely no idea. But that was in a way a reflection of some of the things that happened to him in the campaign. Like, we've heard a couple of times today, people talking about the specific thing that I have in mind is MSNBC has a chart on the screen and it's listing the Republican candidates in order of fundraising success in the recent quarter. And I know because I knew the numbers, Dr. Paul was #2. They listed #1, #3, #4, #5. I mean, it was, I have a screenshot of it. You couldn't believe it. So it got to a point where the movement still to this day debates whether this was a good idea, but the movement raised money to fly a blimp over the country that said Google Ron Paul on it. Because we thought, if the media is going to shut him out, we have to somehow
be bigger than the media.
Get around. Yeah. And so maybe if we put a giant blimp in the sky, people will see that and Google him.
The giant blimp is equivalent to independent media now, pretty much. It
is, which we were on the cusp of getting that, but didn't quite have. And then, I remember I was at the Mises Institute during the 2008 campaign. So I lived in Auburn, Alabama. Yeah. And there was this initiative called Paint the Town Ron. So if the media is going to suppress him, we have to do what we can to get the word out. So the idea was, under cover of night, you would go around your town. This wasn't confined to Auburn. And you would plaster Ron Paul signs everywhere. Who is Ron Paul? Google Ron Paul, vote Ron Paul. So that the next morning people would wake up and they would feel like they were in an occupied territory. And I know we probably should have distinguished between private and public property. We just put signs up.
You guys Boston Tea Partied it.
It was so fun because at that time in 2008, I had 3 very little kids. So we had a minivan. So that meant we could use the minivan to get some of the local college students from Auburn. We could throw them all in the minivan, drive down the street, let them out, hang up signs, and then before the authorities could get there, they'd hop back in and we'd drive down the road. So that was going on all around the country. And then there were websites around Halloween in 2007. There was a website, of course it's defunct now, but it was, if you wanted to go as Ron Paul for Halloween, there was ronpaulmask.com. You could print out a mask of him. And if you wanted to in addition to candy, hand out Ron Paul literature. You could go to ronpauloween.com, and they had some stuff you could burn on a CD-ROM and put it in there with the kids' candy and propagandize the parents. I mean, no one was doing this for anybody else. It wouldn't occur to anybody to do that for anybody else.
Yep. So the media blackout on Ron Paul, it's called the Ron Paul treatment now.
Yeah.
If it happens to any other candidate, like, oh, you're getting the Ron Paul treatment.
Yeah.
But that's how you conquered it. Without independent media, without new media, you were able to conquer it just on your own. And what I said earlier about Boston Tea Partying it, people might not know the origin of Boston Tea Party. They didn't just all of a sudden walk onto the ships. There was a man named Rusticus, and you probably know this, you're a historian too. Rusticus, lost to history, nobody knows who he actually was, but every night at 12:30, you would have the night watchman call out, "Beware the East India Company." And this only happened because he went out and his people went out and the Sons of Liberty went out and they plastered signs all over. All over. These pamphlets would come up and nobody could route them to where they came from.
Yeah.
That's what you did.
Yeah.
Boston Tea Party did.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it was tremendous. Like, we did all kinds of wild things like this. And so, yeah, we didn't win, but we still felt like in some way that we can't quite articulate, a turning point has occurred. Something has changed. Somebody broke through the stupid, pointless debates we have about nothing. The debate between McCain and Romney about how many troops should be withdrawn from Iraq, exactly when, and should we have a timetable. And how inane can you get? The whole thing was stupid and wrong, and we should take them all out. But our media pretends like this is an intense debate going on. Could you distinguish between Mitt Romney and John McCain? I can't.
No, not at all. Absolutely. What do you think? Not you individually, but the mass of people that all saw Ron Paul for who he was. How do you think that happened? What do you think they all saw? What made him special?
He was unrehearsed, so therefore he's not blow-dried with the rehearsed slogans and flattering the public. And he was telling them hard truths, and everyone knew that he would be less popular because he told these truths. And maybe I do want to support somebody who's willing to be less popular if that's what it takes to tell me the truth. I wish we had more people who would have the common sense to see it that way, but I think the people who did see that, that's what they were perceiving in him. And I think they also perceived that this is a wonderful grandfatherly man with kindly instincts, but extremely smart and nobody's fool.
Yep. I love that. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Tom.
A pleasure.
Absolutely. Where can people find you and help support your work?
I have my free non-PC U.S. history courses at woodshistory.com.
Excellent. And on X?
Thomas E. Woods.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for being here with me today.
My pleasure. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. Make sure you check out tomsfreebooks.com. Why are you paying for books when I have all these free ones sitting there waiting for you? tomsfreebooks.com. They're all interesting and provocative, and they don't cost you nothing. So head over to tomsfreebooks.com, and I'll see you next week.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.